It is February 3rd, 2018. This is Fancy Ramen Podcast. I'm Neil.
And I'm Scott.
This is a podcast mostly about video games, though we do tend to get off topic quite a bit on other things that are nerd and, nerd culture.
Yeah, nerd culture, video game adjacent.
Cookie is out this week. He's sick. He possibly has contracted the G virus. Yeah. Well, what have you been up to this week?
I've been enjoying the great weather we've been having. As I look out the window and see a blizzard going on, it seems like that good weather just ended today. Otherwise, it's been getting progressively warmer here than I think it has been for almost anybody in the Midwest, with that big, freezing pocket of cold that impacted what I believe is the Midwest as a whole. I know Omaha was freezing. I was talking to a very good friend of mine in Minnesota who was also dealing with just frigid below zero temperatures. I've been getting by, and now it looks like it's our turn weather-wise.
Yeah, we had the whole winter vortex. I think I might have heard it coined as the freezing vortex, excuse me. And it was actually really pleasant yesterday and today. But I think we're about to get colder too, so we might share your weather.
Okay, yeah, right. There's currently a blizzard raging right outside of my apartment, and I'm watching the snow just pile up. It almost blew our dog away earlier.
Oof.
He walked outside and there was a gust of wind, and apparently he turned right back around and was like, "We're not going outside today."
I've got a perfectly good spot in the corner of your of your apartment to pee in.
Yeah. I'm afraid so. Yeah, other than that, I actually haven't done a whole heck of a lot outside of relaxing at home, which I think I'm going to be forced to do more of with the weather conditions. So no new changes on that front.
It's perfect video game weather.
It really is. And that's why I've gotten a lot of gaming done, luckily. What about you, though, Neil? Have you been up to anything else besides gaming?
I tend to find that there are always things I'll forget about. And maybe rightfully so. If I forget I did them, then they probably weren't worth mentioning anyways. So video games, that's about the big story of the week for me.
I mean, yeah, that's true. The forgettable experiences, if you remember them, are they worth bringing up in the first place? Because I just realized Sierra and I watched a movie last night, but it was terrible, and so I don't feel like talking about it, giving it almost any credence. But
let's make some record time then with our first video game discussion under 10 minutes in a podcast.
Oh my gosh. And speaking about setting a Fancy Ramen podcast speed record, this may be, I think the game that we're about to talk about may be the first game I can think of actually trying to do some sort of speed run on. A game that you and I played, I think, both during this week. Resident Evil 2 Biohazard.
Yeah. I found too, as I was editing the podcast from last week, just last night, which from now on, I'm editing everything same day of, so illness and other things won't get in the way. But I found myself listening back over the podcast and finding myself disagreeing with a lot of the opinions I had at that point in time. We've both finished the game, at least one of the games.
Routes now, yeah.
So, okay. So actually then, let me confirm with you. You finished one route?
I've finished what I believe is it. Well, is there a difference on which route you take depending on which character you take?
I don't know how different it gets, but I don't imagine it's all that different. So there's a first story and then there's a second story, and you can play the quote unquote first story with either Claire or Leon, and the opposite would assumedly be the case for the second, right?
Yeah.
Have you done the first and second?
I am at the not to spoil anything, but I am at the timed portion at the very, very end of the game.
Okay.
Of the second story. So I have played through the first one, and then I am literally 10 minutes away from finishing the second one. What I can say is story 1 and story 2 definitely seem like they have to take place in slightly alternate not alternate universes, but like alternate outcomes. Story 1 is incongruent with the events of story 2, but they're given just enough opportunity for overlap that the experiences you have in story 1, for the most part, you can roughly assume are occurring with that character in story 2, with some like exceptions to boss fights and character interactions with some key characters. Like if you play as Claire in story A like I did, and you play as Leon in story B like I also did, there are some events that happen that have to be mutually exclusive with Claire's story A and Leon's story B. You can't have a main character die in story 1 in front of character A and then have them die in front of character B in story B and have both of those stories be like possible in the real world. Even with the concept of zombies and resurrection, it still doesn't make sense necessarily.
Right. Let's go ahead and just say, let's open up the floor to spoilers.
I hope so. Spoilers are going to make this conversation a lot easier.
I don't know if spoilers really matter that much to people that have played the original Resident Evil 2, but we're definitely going to get into some details about what I find is a few like flaws in the approach and design of this game, as well as some like not really analysis of the plot, but using plot points as examples to better explain that of which what we're talking about right now.
Mm-hmm.
So warnings are here. They're, up front. Don't you'll have a timestamp to jump ahead if you want to avoid the said spoilers, but consider this your fair warning. This has been a minute of filler to make sure you would have enough time to reach for your phone or podcast listening device to change things or to stop the playback. So we're talking about Annette Birkin most likely, right?
Yeah, exactly. Annette Birkin can't be both like putting different people into the same garbage room. Well, it's both of the Birkins, really. Annette Birkin can't be putting her daughter or Ada Wong into the same garbage room at the same time with you going through unlocking the puzzles of adding power to a panel so you can access it with a switch and open the door. Because how would Leon or any story events revert that for Claire's time through the area, or vice versa? I think Claire actually has the lead on Leon in all of these situations.
Well, she has the lead since you played as Claire in your first story, or if we use the terms A and B. But I found like some things like if you, I don't think this is a surprise to you, but if you were to play Claire B, you wouldn't have the interactions with Marvin, and if you played with Leon A or Leon First Story, you would interact with Marvin there.
Oh, so Claire would interact with I assume Claire would interact with the journalist then in story B then, right? Or does Claire still go to save Sherry? That's the real question.
Yeah, so I think those are specific character routes. So the journalist is always an interaction with Ada and Leon, and Sherry is always with Claire. But like the Marvin interaction, for instance, that's important because Marvin essentially is your tutorial is like your direction. He serves as like the person giving you directions to complete the game, or at least the police station. And obviously on your second time through, you wouldn't necessarily need that same guidance.
And so it's gone and you get a torn notebook.
Yep. And in contrast, you learn from Marvin if you play Claire A. I started playing Claire A yesterday, that Chris is on vacation. So if you play as Leon A, Claire doesn't get that information, and instead Leon tells her in a note, kind of like the ones you probably are finding as Leon B going through the police station and the all of the different levels.
Yeah. Except Chris actually on vacation? Because I don't think he is.
Well, yeah, he's on some sort of mission, and I think what he has done is he's basically told. So I thought the initial premise of that note is it's obviously code. Like he's basically saying like, hey, in 3 months or 1 month or whatever it is, something's going to happen. But I think what that note might have actually meant was not so much a warning of the events to transpire, unless he knows that Umbrella is going to actually plan an attack on Birkin, which would potentially start all of these events from happening. I think the event of Racoon City getting infested was not one planned out by anyone.
Yeah.
Like we get the tapes alluding to the fact that it's because the rats ended up getting infected, which is what spread it.
Chris laced the rats in Umbrella HQ.
Unless Chris is actually Hunk, and the Resident Evil 7, twists and theories all become full circle. No, but more specifically though, he sends that letter, obviously telling the STARS members to get the hell out or something, because there are no STARS members with the exception of Resident Evil 3. What happens in that game? We see the few remaining STARS members in Racoon City and what happens to them. But like Barry, Chris, I guess that's it. Like the heavy hitters that we know of aside from Jill end up leaving Racoon City, and likely as a result from that letter. But every other police officer there probably read that letter and are like, oh, he's on vacation. Huh, that's cool.
He's kind of a misogynist.
Yeah, he is. So yeah, Do you get that letter? Oh yeah, no, both characters get that letter, regardless.
I just
of what
know
path.
that when you play as Claire reads the letter, and her flavor dialogue is, "This doesn't sound like Chris at all."
Yeah,
this isn't Chris, is the vibe that you get from it. So even though I don't remember, I guess Chris Redfield, he's a player character in Resident Evil 5, right?
Yep, he's the one of the two
big
protagonists.
burly dude.
He's not the black woman.
He's not the black woman. Yeah, he's the big burly dude. Yeah, I did not remember much about him whatsoever, but I wouldn't have known that wasn't his player character type even after playing some of Resident Evil 5. So it's nice that there's that bit from Claire that lets you know that it's probably a fake letter and he's not just kind of an asshole. Because that's what I thought at first when I read it until I got her response.
You just leave the babes to me, Barry. I'll handle the babes. This is too big for you.
Is Leon a STARS member or just someone who's joining the police force? Like, is Leon an honorary STARS for surviving? How does that work?
So, yeah, this is spoiler territory, so it's fine to talk about. So like in Resident Evil 4, you know that he's someone working for the United States government.
Yeah.
I think they also kind of allude to the prospects through the story here that like he basically gets the idea from Ada. It seems like that like there's probably a need for someone that actually knows how to deal with zombies and shit and has some of this information in. So that's probably
not a mercenary.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it inspires him to become like an agent at that point. But at the start of Resident Evil 2, he's literally just a promising cadet or recruit that had to go through like an academy. So I imagine he's like probably on the straight path or the straight line to like detective or higher ranking officer at some point in time.
Yeah. I mean, and his personality traits for this game are very different from or to some degree, much less, they're a lot more naive than obviously Resident Evil 4 Leon. And they're also a lot more like goody, I'm a narc with a clean haircut.
Yeah.
As Sierra described him.
They also
He's
retcon
lawful
a few
good in
things.
this game.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They retcon a few things too with him.
Okay.
Notably that in the original game, and I could be mistaken because it's been years, obviously, since I played or even watched or anything the original game, but I'm pretty sure he's like going to Racoon City with the intention of just being like, I'm a new cop. Great. Oh, what the hell's going on? And again, I could be wrong, but the implication here in this remake is that actually he knew that shit was happening, and he chooses, like, after hesitating, he chooses to go in and try and help. So like that paints him as much more of like a heroic figure as opposed to some doofus with a penis haircut trying to or getting tossed into a bad situation. Gives him more purpose, in my opinion, and it better suits his character.
I am sad that he loses that East Coast accent, though. Hey, what's this? A zombie?
But yeah, that's maybe like my only complaint about the game is that the two routes are not as different as I wanted them to be. And I don't necessarily think changing the combination of the statues is a good justification for like changing, or it's not like a good enough change in the route. It does force you to still do things to find the correct combination. And it also, like, the existence of the combinations in those things also help with speedrunning, I'm assuming, because you don't have to hunt down photos and stuff anymore. Yeah. But ultimately, like, getting through the second story kind of left me feeling a little lackluster for a couple other reasons that I won't bring up with you quite yet. But, like, when I think of it that way, or when I think of it from like a broader standpoint, like I distance myself from my personal opinions and try to analyze why it is I feel that way about a game in general. And it really boils down to the complaint that I want more content.
Yeah.
And that's not like the worst thing in a game. Like ultimately I got 10 hours out of the first playthrough because I'm garbage. And I got roughly 10 hours out of the second playthrough because, Tiffany played the second playthrough. It probably would have been way shorter, but I think we both went under with the misconception of having the same amount of ammo that I did in Leon's playthrough when they basically force you to use the quick draw army.
What's that?
The revolver?
Wait, the revolver? What? I don't know what revolver there is in any of these games. Oh, the SLS 60 for Claire? Is that what you're talking about?
No, didn't you pick up the quick draw as Leon in your second story?
The Thunderbolt?
Not the Thunderhawk.
50 cal? Okay.
It's a gun that you literally hold up like you're a cowboy quick firing. And
no, I've got an ACP gun that he holds sort of sideways or ajar like he's a gangster. And then I have the Matilda, which I have complaints about the Matilda even being in this game. And then what else? Yeah, and then shotgun and flamethrower and the Thunderhawk or whatever. Those are the only guns that I accessed in this game.
Oh, okay. So the M19 is what you're using, right? That uses the ACP ammo?
Yeah, the ACP 45.
So, okay, if you were to play Leon, you end up getting the quick draw army, which is just a 6-shooter with
it's a revolver. Yeah,
yeah, with the caveat that like it seems to have like a slightly stronger punch than like your typical Samurai Edge or Matilda or SLS.
Yeah,
but it uses those ACP rounds, which are only show up in your second playthrough on either character, and they replace the 9mm rounds that you would normally find, and in lower quantities too. So,
I didn't know that they would replace for Claire's as well. The reason that the Matilda was such a shit weapon for me in the second playthrough is because you could only craft 9mm ammo.
Yep,
because they replaced everything otherwise.
Which like would be the case with the SLS if you played Leon first and then played Claire's story.
So, interesting.
Now, the issue about the quick draw army, which is maybe even a bigger, like I guess you could say, like the bigger downfall compared to the M19, is that the quick draw army, you have to eject every bullet after use and insert every bullet upon reloading. So you fire 6 rounds, you then watch your character push out each bullet and rotate the whatever
cylinder.
you call it. Yeah,
It would be
exactly.
the cylinder. Is there a quick draw? Is there a quick loader that you can pick up? Because Claire's SLS gets a quick loader for her 5 cartridge cylinder.
Unfortunately, not, because the canister or whatever you want to call that doesn't actually flip out for the quick draw. Instead, there's just a small slot that you move, and it gives you access to one hole. So you are like, you shoot your 6 rounds, and then you watch the character eject 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Load in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And by that point, Mr. X has punched you in the face several times.
Potentially. And so as you get through different, as you go through, like, what I consider to be the actual last boss of the game, like the Dark Souls boss of Resident Evil 2, which is the crazy demon form of William Birkin.
The very last one, or the timed one?
Not the timed one, but the
arena one.
The arena one beforehand. Yeah. I consider that to be like the last boss, in my opinion.
Me too.
That's like the best. That's a really, really fun fight.
Yeah, especially because
it's literally
in both fights, I made sure, like, I knew that something big was happening when I walked through the room the first time, being all dome shaped and having nothing going on in it.
Yep.
And so I just carried every frag grenade that I had saved since the beginning of the game into the fight and fragged him to death.
Well, so if you were low on ammo at that point, that fight gives you a few extra magazines for other weapons.
I feel like you get a lot of ammo right before that fight and then in the middle of it.
Yeah, in the middle of it, you get a lot of ACP ammo, which would be for your M19 or the quick draw.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, the game really forces you to use that secondary handgun, the quote-unquote, like, unlocked handgun from the first playthrough, meaning that you only get the handgun by beating the first story, and it's available only in the second story. So by doing that, they effectively changed the way that someone would play after playing the A path, because you're no longer using plentiful quantities of the Matilda or SLS to, like, kneecap people and run by them. You now have this ammo that is supposed to be able to quote-unquote crit better,
but
you also have
necessarily.
Yeah, it's a chance. It's like a coin flip, or, well, technically worse than a coin flip, but you ultimately have to evaluate every encounter with zombies and multiple zombies in a completely different light as a result. You have less ammo, but the ammo's stronger. But I mean, like, the game, as I put it, though, the game gave me like 20 hours of content just from the first playthroughs. And obviously, they want you to continue to play through the game, its extra modes, and also try and get your A rank and your S rank finishes.
Yeah.
So, like, I can't really fault the game for not having a whole lot of content, because the content I was given was really good.
It's sort of like, for me, my only other context of completing a game is Resident Evil 4. And Resident Evil 4 was a very long campaign, which was great. But additionally, you unlocked extra weapons and bonus items and whatnot for your second playthrough of it, thus sort of doubling the length of the campaign. And then, or for me, with a lot of these games, I'm like very fearfully looking around corners for the first game. So my second time is almost halved because I'm less terrified.
Yeah.
But Resident Evil 4 also had all of those like challenge environments where they dropped you in the middle of an environment, and then you had like a little bit of starter items, and you'd scavenge around the area and try and take out as many zombies as possible or complete a task and get a badge. And that gave you other like bonus materials or content, which this doesn't have that, as far as I know.
You might discover new things once you finish the B route or the second story route. There's some big positives I wanted to point out, and I also wanted to like provide a couple corrections that I had talked about from last week. Notably, I was way off about the playtime, and I don't know if it's just a misconception or if it's actually true, but I felt like I spent in the original a lot more time in the police headquarters than I did the other areas of the game. In fact, I believe I feel like the sewer was literally just an extremely short stretch of the game, and then there's the lab.
Yeah, and now the
lab's also
sewer
pretty
is
short.
less than a third of the game, but close to that value and how long you spend there.
Yeah, and the nest felt like its own police station as well, a little shorter too. So
Yeah.
it'd be close to maybe like 40, 30, 30 from headquarters to sewer and lab, or maybe 50, 20, 30.
Yeah, that sounds right.
But in doing so, they actually did a really good job, in my opinion, of keeping the game really fresh feeling for that first playthrough. As soon as I was getting comfortable with having Mr. X, or the tyrant, whatever you want to call him, chasing after you or me, and as soon as I got comfortable with that prospect, the game kicked me out of the, well, not actually kicked me out, but the game led me to the new area, and I had to deal with new threats and those G adults, I think is what the model viewer called them. And then once I actually started getting comfortable with those encounters, suddenly I was in the nest, or in nest, I guess.
Yeah.
And dealing with those enemies. And once I got comfortable with dealing with those enemies, I found myself progressing into the end game. Like, I felt they did a really good job of pacing these sequences and these enemy types, because as soon as I felt comfortable, I was once again taken out of my comfort zone.
They definitely follow a really good amount of balance where initially in the police station, you're fighting 1 to 2 zombies, or in a very large environment, 3 to 4. That you can kite around with a lot of space or other objects. There is a point where you're at Nest that there are, I think, 4 to 5 zombies that spawn, and then 2 lickers, at least in story part B, if you ignore those zombies initially. And that was the first time in a while that I had felt overwhelmed and used I used a healing item. I'm pretty sure I used a flashbang and a frag grenade and a fair amount of ammo, because I got swarmed, partially because I was misremembering what activated the zombies behind me, and so I walked myself into a corner that I think the game assumed I should have known about. But also the 2 lickers was an upgrade from story A path, where I thought there would only be one, so I was ready for one and dealt with that while the other one took me down when I wasn't paying attention. That's what I found really cool about the pacing of the game that I agree with, is even from story A to story B, going through the same situations, they do throw in not only an added layer of difficulty with the ammo scarcity, but they also do seem to turn up the enemy spawns by like 1 enemy or 2, depending on the type, at certain locations or points in the game. So even if I have pretty good memory about what happened last time, they can still catch me off guard, which was really good. And then the playing from Claire to Leon, the Mr. X appearances were, I would say they were a lot more frequent in the Leon storyline. And so I was like further hounded by him in areas that I had not had to worry about him as a threat with Claire as Leon. So even though I could kite him in the police station easy enough, there were a couple of times where he popped out in locations I was not expecting and scared the living shit out of me, because I thought, how did he get here? And like, when is he truly neutralized? Because he gets neutralized in Claire's storyline at a point, and then you do not worry about him again. In Leon's storyline, there was never a time in which Mr. X was out for the count, and so when he bust out of a glass wall in Nest, I was about ready to cry from just like complete exasperation and surprise.
It's specific to Leon because he jumped out of the glass on my A playthrough as well.
Okay.
But I think it's because it's not, I think it's absolutely by design. They give you a flamethrower in Leon's route, right?
Yeah.
And the flamethrower is extremely effective at destroying those plant enemies. It's like whatever you want to call the quantity of fuel, but it's numerically represented. It's like 30 or 40 to actually completely eliminate that enemy. So when you get to that,
that's almost exactly it. I just tested it earlier this morning.
and so when you get to that point, you're not necessarily, at least I wasn't my first time playing it, dispatching all of the enemies. I'm just like burning the ones that are there, and I'm like, I'm gonna go pick this up, and it's gonna be fine. It's easy. Like scary music's playing in the background, but that's okay because I like, as long as they're in front of me, I can deal them.
Yeah.
Yep. But as soon as you pick up that bracelet, so at that point in time, like you getting there means that you are comfortable with the situation. You're comfortable with having to deal with 3 or 4 of those plant guys and more possibly that drop down. So when you pick up that bracelet, that triggers in that extra twist where they're like, well, okay, so you can handle the plant fiends, but can you handle the plant fiends with Mr. X on your ass?
Yeah.
And
in a room that is also designed for him to be able to cut a corner and get in front of you in seconds.
mm-hmm.
There's no long way around for him because there's essentially like a cross point in the middle of the platforms where he'll just jump right on in.
It's well executed, well planned.
Yeah.
It's one of the critical reasons why it's so enjoyable, or like these types of games are so enjoyable to me with very thought out, meticulous campaigns, because a lot of the times getting something like this in like a more open game is happen chance, like a matter of luck. I mean, this is probably obvious, but the weapon differences between the two characters really do make the games feel fairly different between the two. And I didn't even have to play Claire's to realize how different it was watching Tiffany play it. We watched each other play, so we had the knowledge, or she had the knowledge of like how I dispatched enemies and what was becoming effective. And so she applied that to her playthrough. But then when we immediately realized that the crossbow wasn't there, or not immediately rather, but when we came to the conclusion that the crossbow was not in the game, which was effectively Claire's shotgun, the differences in weapons started to really become evident. Like she doesn't have a magnum. She doesn't have a concentrated high power attack. She has 2 grenade round types that serve more as like damage over time attacks and don't provide the same stopping power. She has a machine gun or a submachine gun that does well at like cutting off limbs of enemies if you focus fire enough, but really doesn't have the stopping power the shotgun did either. And that's basically
and you
the
can't
shotgun
shoot someone in the
replacement.
head super effectively with that. Even if they're on the ground, like the headshots with it is no more effective than just taking 3 rounds from your pistol or whatever.
Yeah. It's especially like, it was really effective because you really can't play the two characters alike aside from their pistols, and even the pistols are different because you're no longer picking up your 9mm ammo in the second story. You're picking up the ACP 45 or whatever number. They did a good job. I think a really good job in establishing and designing those core mechanical differences from the two characters. And if only they could have gotten the story told in ways that didn't contradict each other.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of like a bone I'm picking, especially because they call it second story. It's like, but these two things couldn't happen at the same time. But I guess they also realized that like that this was always a problem in Resident Evil and Resident Evil 2. So maybe they're just like, well, I mean, you guys are okay with continuity issues with the games anyways, so may as well stay true to the game.
While we're at it, we'll retcon Leon, and I don't know this personally, but I heard that Ada Wong was made a lot more like confident and just badass right from the get-go in this game versus previous iterations of her.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I'm really sad that her portion was as short as it was, because I really enjoyed playing as Ada.
Did you like playing as Sherry? I was watching Tiffany play that, and I was like mortified, like filled with anxiety the entire time.
Sherry's is very scary. So they do it. Like, I did enjoy playing as Sherry. That was a welcome surprise. However, it's It is a very special type of fear that I only experienced during her portion of the game because of your lack of your lack of power in this situation. Like Sherry will never be able to fight back, and so it is an extended Mr. X or like tyrant experience, except the tyrant is like hurling insults at you at the same time. And you can't even make him, take a Tim Tebow knee if you shoot him in the face a couple times, because the most dangerous thing Sherry had on her person was a pair of safety scissors, which she apparently gets rid of.
Yeah, once she cuts that cardboard, which you could have just torn off anyways.
Yeah.
Like apparently the blade was too dull at that point. And the whole experience too of being in the same room with that enemy, it was reminiscent of Little Nightmares. Obviously not an actual gameplay and such, but just the idea of evading capture within feet of your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's like in ways I'm even more in love with this game than I was last week, but at the same time, I've definitely started to see more of the flaws.
Yeah, you can start to see the seams a little bit more. I started encountering some small little graphical hiccups or errors. I had a crash happen when I went into the garbage room a little too fast.
Oh, interesting.
It wasn't ready to load all that garbage, all that beautiful, beautiful rendered garbage. There are a couple other things. I thought it was weird how you could see the lines of herbicide fluid in the first lab where you have to meter it out through the machine, even though there's no reason that you need to be able to see that. Everything that you need to see for the measurement is already in the vials in the glass space, but I could actually see like the tubes glowing below it as well. Both when I'm zoomed in activating the station for the herbicide measuring and when I'm just like in third person mode looking at it, which I thought was weird. And I think I had all my graphical settings set to high, so I didn't have the highest quality, but I definitely was surprised by that.
I'll have to
just being an active choice.
If you encounter that again on a second playthrough or something, you should screenshot it and send it to me.
It was both playthroughs, so I will play a third playthrough and find it again.
Just for this.
Well, I think I figured out how to play Leon effectively, but I don't think I ever figured that out for Claire. With Leon, even in the second round, I was kneecapping and then using the shotgun to blow the head off of every zombie, so it's almost no wasted ammo. You essentially spend 1 to 3 rounds to take off a leg, and then if you don't have a combat knife nearby, you very quickly just one shotgun round straight to the head, and it is a guaranteed disposal of a standard zombie enemy. And then for almost every enemy type, there was an effective way to take them out with like a fairly small amount of use of ammo, where I was never out of ammo, sometimes low and very close, but always able to like spend an extra bullet or two into Mr. X's head if he cornered me. So
did you see the most effective way to deal with lickers in Claire's playthrough?
Oh, yes, you lure them right next to you, and then you hit them with a grenade cartridge, and you don't take any splash damage. So you literally point blank shoot them, and it's one cartridge normally.
You can also, since I'm not sure how effective how effective these bullets or ammo or the gun is for other enemies, but the shotgun is also only one bolt on lickers.
In their head, in their little exposed brain.
I don't think it matters where, just as long as you might need the charge for it or whatever buffs it up. Like you find it, in Nest.
The extended barrel or
the pretty crosshair that somehow makes it stronger. Like whatever bullshit they want to say.
Not the shotgun, the shock blast or whatever.
Yeah. Sorry, the electric thing that uses those needles.
It's so late in the game that I didn't really use it for anything because then it was plants, and I didn't think electricity would work on plants very well.
Well, they don't set them on fire, which I thought they would if you increase the temperature up high enough.
That's true. Well, the other question for me then was I don't actually know how to use that weapon effectively because the first time I used it was on the swamp monsters, or not the swamp monsters, the sewer like behemoths that are in the water. And those big sewer behemoths, I didn't know until Leon's playthrough, you break the mud off of their eyeball for the first like attack, and then you focus the attack on the eyeball. And you don't get too far away because they have a charge attack or they shoot little minions at you, which causes you to waste ammo. Or I guess maybe knife durability if you're feeling that brave. But I shot it with the shocker and I brought it all the way up and it didn't seem to really damage it very much. So I said, this weapon's shit, and I put it away and never used it again.
Did you use the flamethrower on those at all?
The flamethrower doesn't work so great either.
Okay, that's what I found too. So when we got to that point with Claire on the second story, we both were thinking maybe it's just like the flamethrower in that like this weapon is not meant to be used now but later. But that weapon seems actually pretty tough to use in other situations because what it does is you shoot the electric prongs into an enemy, and then you have to continue keeping the reticle pointed at them to continue shocking them. But so only certain enemies will actually be halted by the initial shock and continue to be stunned. So if you try and use that on Mr. X or anyone else, any tougher enemies, they'll just keep moving towards you, basically. So it doesn't seem to be like an effective solution for anything but liquors and the plant things. But the plant things, if you have the extra rounds, I imagine, and I say this because we didn't have the extra rounds at this point, but I imagine the napalm grenade rounds would be way more effective on those plant things.
Oh, yeah. Yep. You just, you hit them once.
Although I also don't know how necessary it is to dispatch those things permanently in Claire's playthrough because you're not going to have Mr. X behind you. Whereas with Leon's playthrough, like the correct way to deal with that big room before Mr. X jumps in. Yep, kill everybody first, and then you're just running away from Mr. X, which you're, more prepared for.
Yeah. No, the plant zombies, I think the effective move for Claire and what I did was use the abundant ammo to shoot their pods to stun them and then hit them with the napalm round for like the last one or so. And that also would have enough fire damage to burn them to a crisp.
It's so interesting, like the way we talk about this game, I kind of find, and again, maybe it's just because I have a hard-on for this game and I have a hard-on for the Souls games, but it kind of feels like we're talking about like enemy encounters in Souls.
Yeah, it is. I totally get that. And there aren't that many games besides Resident Evil and Dark Souls I can think of in which each enemy like requires, or not requires, but there is a definitive benefit to taking certain strategies to an encounter. I'm trying to think of other, like Hollow Knight and other games like that. I'm trying to think of maybe one more example, but those are all games in which I can talk about like this enemy requires this particular tactical approach in order for you to really have much success. Otherwise, there are other ways to brute force it or like another cheesing strategy, but they may not always be effective or easily viable due to some other sort of constraint.
And in both games, you can also choose if you, the environment allows for the strategy of just running past.
Yeah, which is the ultimate Dark Souls technique. The
boss
forward,
rush.
the forward flee. I guess Legend of Zelda had that in some of its games. That's something the Game Boy games and like Skyward Sword, for instance, where techniques on how to hit them with your sword or certain items are just so much more effective than any other approach.
Yeah.
But you ultimately can take multiple approaches. Like you can kill wolves in the forest of Ocarina of Time with a bomb, but it's a terrible idea. Like you place the bomb, you back away from it, and you hold your shield up so they attack your shield and their tail's exposed to the explosion. But why would you ever try and make that like your strategy? It's not a good one, but it works. So in the same sense, Resident Evil, like there are a multitude of ammo types and weapons that I could have come up with 5 strategies to take down those big sewer tumor monsters, but there's only 1 or 2 that I think was really an effective use of my ammo or time.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I had anything else to say regarding Biohazard or Resident Evil.
It's a good game. I enjoyed it a lot, and I didn't realize how much I missed the experience that I got from Resident Evil 4. And playing this game was fun to do so. My only complaint is the shotgun with its barrel extension is still a smaller item slot than the Thunderhawk with its barrel extension. The shotgun is a two-handed item that takes one block, and the Thunderhawk is a one-handed item that takes two. And I made sure to double-check this, but with their first upgrades, the Thunderhawk doubles its capacity or its storage space, while the shotgun doesn't double until you add a stock to it, even though it definitely gets more barrel length, and it is more like cumbersome of an item in reality. And it pissed me off to no end that the big deagle was somehow a two slot item, and the shotgun was a single slot. I know that they probably did this for balance because it's such a powerful pointed item, but it was silly to me. Like, it just seemed a little foolish to make that gun a two slot item.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's not as bad for me because when I walked into the game, I was honestly expecting it to be the same constrained inventory from the original game. So when I started getting like inventory
Hit
slots
pouches.
open up, at that point I was immediately like, well, I have no reason to complain about inventory anymore. Like, especially when you go into those, like, your timed boss encounters, or even the last boss. I think you have all of your hit patch, quote-unquote, last boss, the last Dark Souls boss. Straight up, like, fallen angel, Cthulhu monster boss. You have your full inventory at that point. So, like, unless you've really been doing well with your health items, you probably are taking most of your useful weapons, aka not the flamethrower or the... Well, I took the flamethrower. What did I not take?
I think you can take with Leon on this last fight, you can take every weapon for the most part and its ammo type and still have room for like 2 or 3 healing items, or a slot for like 3 to 6 grenades.
I don't even know if you have any counters in that fight now that I think about it.
Counters?
As in, like, you get grabbed, you use your knife, or you get grabbed, you use
You
a
don't
grenade.
have any. Yeah, I put my knife away. But if you just throw 6 grenades in succession, you end the fight for the most part.
Seriously?
So, that's all it really takes is shooting out a couple eyeballs and then throwing grenades over and over, and then the fight's over.
Oh, when he's got his chest exposed. I didn't realize the grenades were that strong.
Yeah, they are. You just gotta hit that exposed chest a bunch.
That is good to know. That is probably like a speedrun technique too, then I take it. You hoard
you do have to collect all of the frag grenades and never use them because you only get like 6 or 7 in the whole game.
Still, I bet that is potentially like the correct way to speed through that fight, because you can't just... Like, I unloaded like nearly a full clip of Magnum ammo into the exposed chest, and he still didn't go down, so...
Yeah.
It's a good game.
He goes into the second phase, I should say, even if you're doing the frag grenade strategy, or if not second phase, I guess. He exposes his chest and then you throw frag grenades again, and that you can get him to kneel, expose his chest a second time, and take him out with the additional pressure of the frag grenades. It's not the shoot out the eyeballs, throw frag grenades, game over. It's shoot out the eyeballs, throw frag grenades, continue to throw frag grenades as he's not staggered anymore to re-stagger him, and then continue to throw frag grenades, and now he's dead.
That's pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah, I can't wait to get the RPG in this game.
I kind of wish the unlockables were not so hard to get, and maybe that's just because I'm bad at video games, I guess, but...
Are they S rank only?
They're S rank, I think, and S plus rank. I believe it's S rank.
I'm never
only.
gonna get that.
So, but like S rank, even S rank, you have to have like only 3 saves, and play it under 2.5 hours for your first route and 2 for the second route.
That is unfathomable to me on how difficult that is.
So I imagine it's all about maximizing your. I mean, at that point, it's straight up like novice speed running. I imagine, knowing
I can't remember how you access those items in Resident Evil 4. I think you buy them. They're just like exorbitantly expensive in Resident Evil 4 to buy the typewriter and the rocket launcher.
I remember like saving up so much money from killing. There's like some enemy types in 4 that replenish automatically that you can farm up, but I don't remember. It's been way too long. Yeah. Did you play any other games you want to talk about?
No, I didn't touch anything else.
Well, you spent that. I mean, that's some good time spent.
Yeah, it really feels that way. I looked up a review for Ace Combat 7, and Metacritic's got it like 80%. So I'm excited, but I may wait. I also think it might be the perfect VR experience. And since I don't have VR, I'm feeling iffy about it.
So you bring that up. I saw that it was VR compatible too, and I was like, oh, that might be interesting. And then I watched some gameplay, and I just immediately knew, like, nope, can't do it.
Not for me.
Gonna probably vomit all over the place. Like playing a flight sim game or a dogfighting game on a monitor or TV is like does not bother me. At least it hasn't bothered me in the past. Playing it in VR is probably gonna bother me.
Yeah, now that I think about it, like that's I want to get sick playing this game, and not the bad kind of sick where you have that like the screen door effect. I want to get sick like my body thinks it's pulling G's that it's not.
You're gonna be like upside down at some points, and you won't be.
Absolutely. Which has made me sick before, because I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast, but my old laboratory invested in an Oculus Rift setup because it works with like 3-dimensional molecular modeling. That's something we could do, and it's not easy to manipulate on a keyboard and mouse, or it's not as intuitive. It gets easy once you get used to it, but it's one of those things where you just get good at it after doing it for a long time, but initially you're very confused. And so to improve navigation and like looking at these molecular models, we got it. But that doesn't mean we didn't test out just the other basic functions, you know, Google Earth and whatnot. And I had inverted my perspective in Google Earth on accident somehow and almost fell over in the lab, because going from a like standing on the ground position, looking at the ground below me, to inversion of standing on the ground, looking at the sky below me and the ground above me, was just like super disorienting and completely turned my stomach.
Well, if you find yourself in Omaha anytime soon,
I'll try it again. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got that PSVR to hook you up. So I have 2 games to talk about. One only lightly, but for Chrono Trigger fans out there everywhere, well, the core staff from that game actually just made a mobile game that released just a week or 2 ago called Another Eden. And this is straight up a single player game that is about time travel and about cats, I guess, too. I don't know much about it, but I have seen a bit of the gameplay. Tiffany's been playing it, and it seems really well developed from a standpoint of like embracing the fact that the game is a mobile game. So instead of trying to fit mobile gaming into the JRPG formula, they instead embrace the idea of like, we need to figure out how to make movement work on a touchscreen and make battles feel better on a touchscreen. So like, and this is maybe all I can really say about it quite yet. I've got it installed, haven't started it yet. But like movement around the map, it's mostly side scroll with some up and down, or rather foreground and background movement.
Okay.
All of the movement is done by clicking anywhere on the screen and dragging your finger in a direction. That causes, like, so if you click anywhere and move slightly to the left, you're going to start causing your character to walk to the left. The further you drag, the faster they go. Really, really simple. And I think like the beauty behind that is pretty genius. And in battles, instead of going through your typical battle menu where you choose each character's actions, instead their assigned actions are listed by their names, like their status, whatever, like the blocks that or windows that show their HP and MP and so forth. You have those actions there, and all you do is you click on each person to assign a specific action. And if they don't need to be changed, if whatever you had the last turn was fine, you just go ahead and start the turn.
Set, yeah.
Which, I mean, that seems very, shall we say, like, simple. But I can't think of a game that has utilized this type of control mechanism outside of, like, Persona 2 in a very different way, I guess you could say, even then. So I'm super curious about this game. The music is also done by the original composer of Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross as well. And the tracks I heard when I was watching Tiffany play are straight up like, oh, this sounds like Chrono Trigger music.
So the one question I have for that, I guess, carryover action where each turn you get to essentially you can leave your units to do the same thing as before, correct?
I'm assuming.
What's the difference between that and having cursor memory in menus where I've played games that are, say, like a turn-based JRPG where it's like if I used a magic action last turn, if I just mash the select button again like 2 or 3 times, it'll automatically do the exact same thing I did last time.
Because I think have to. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Besides having to mash the input, like, it doesn't make me do any of the extra navigation work. Is it just the fact that you don't even have to do that that's satisfying?
Yeah, because I don't know if people would agree with me, but I think menu interaction on a phone to begin with is cumbersome. So like
true.
If you want to set it up like that, because you're right, a lot of JRPGs have memory location or cursor memory location or whatever you would call it. What are you going to click then to continue to proceed through each character's actions? Is there going to be like an A button in the corner or something? Like the idea of trying to fit that traditional turn-based JRPG into the mobile game, so to speak, or vice versa, the mobile into that, like introduces the concept of having buttons that are consistent or like persistent rather. And I think that was one of the core things they wanted to avoid. They didn't want to have a D-pad or an accept and cancel or back button set in stone on the screen. And not to mention, of course, the fact, as you alluded to, you wouldn't have to hammer through confirm, 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 or select, select, select. You just have a, like begin turn or whatever button, a commence battle button.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to reserve giving any more judgment to it. I brought up the music, and I did that specifically because I had played a handful of games since Chrono Cross and Chrono Trigger that the composer of those games had done, and the music didn't necessarily sound like Chrono Trigger. Not saying that it has to, but like some of the soundtracks weren't necessarily great either, like Valkyria Revolution. It was a soundtrack. It did its job, but it didn't have the same sort of it didn't drive my emotions in the same way that his 2 Chrono series games did. So throwing that out there, it's free to play obviously, and I'm sure there's like gacha mechanics built in. And speaking of gacha mechanics, I have been playing a new mobile game that is kind of on the weirder side, at least for people that aren't like super into anime. And even then, this is still a little on the weird side from there, but it's called Destiny Child. Not to be mistaken for the great band Destiny's Child. But it's a super straight up typical gacha game like Summoner's War or anything like that, where you use polls, so to speak, to summon new allies or monsters or demons or whatever you want to call it. This one's a little heavy on the anime and waifu aesthetic, absolutely heavy on that. But I really appreciate the game from 2 different standpoints. The first one is that it seems to be extremely free-to-play friendly. In the gacha system in general, a lot of like units, as we'll call them, are judged between 1 to 5 stars. And usually to get 5 stars reliably, you're dumping in real cash. And you might get some freebies, so to speak, just by playing through the game. I haven't spent any money. I did throw like $9 their way just as like a sign of like, hey, I am actually enjoying my time in this game and so forth. It's something that I'll do with like mobile games when I feel legitimately that they should keep making their mobile game. But but beforehand though, I was able to get like 5 stars and such just through like the free to play mechanics of the game. So it seems extremely friendly for people that don't want to spend money, which I personally think is like a big proponent to being a good mobile game and being of good design, because let's be real, like they're making most of their money off of whales or the people that spend like a shit ton of money on the game, and not the people that spend $5 and $10 here and there. So they're encouraging like a steady, strong player base, but there's still things there to offer for the whales. And the other aspect of the game that I really appreciated, though, which is like the gameplay itself, or you could almost even argue lack thereof. There's like the battle system is a lot deeper than than I would ever imagine from a mobile game, and there's a pretty wide variety of party compositions you can create using characters persisting of these 5 different roles: attackers, defenders, debuffers, support or buffers basically, and I'm missing one. Oh, healers. But like it goes even deeper than that, because all of these different characters have different skills and different abilities. But that's it. I don't want to talk too much about mobile games. I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm actually having a lot of fun playing this game. More so than I ever expected to get out of a mobile game since I stopped playing Summoner's War like 3 years ago.
Yeah. Fire Emblem Heroes has been out for 2 years. You can see if it's gotten any better for me.
So I tried playing Langrisser. Is
that okay?
It's similar. It's extremely similar to Fire Emblem, at least in my opinion. Not like if you're getting very specific into SRPGs, but on the mobile game format, it's a similar title. And I kind of think one of my problems about like the SRPG format in general is that I don't know, it's not the type of game I want to play on my phone. I like Destiny Child because there's a lot of automation built into it, which like you could argue makes it feel more like a clicker at times. But I want like from a mobile game, I like the numbers getting higher and your achievements getting higher, so to speak. And if I'm able to do that by setting like auto battles into play and having like a team grind through a dungeon repeatedly when I'm not paying attention to it, I appreciate that. And maybe there is something like that in Fire Emblem or Langrisser, but it wasn't presented to me in an easy to find way. And if there is, I also just don't trust the AI to handle turn-based grid combat as well as I do. It's not like it's hard. It's just like I min-max everything. Like I always walk one square out of their range and make them walk up to me, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is, I can't remember if I'm mixing this up with an actual Fire Emblem game that's not mobile, but I'm pretty sure there is like an auto battle option. And I think I remember it being not so smart. Like with those mobile games, mostly the numbers are what's determining the victory, but there are some ways that you can really like apply pressure on a better opponent if you're very like careful with your strategy and like make tactical choices that just barely like squeeze the numbers in your favor. Either way, mobile games, not my field really. I don't have much to ask or add.
Depending on how much I like another Eden, maybe I'll consider myself more of an enthusiast of the platform. Because if the story is actually good, Tiffany's been telling me it's pretty interesting, and the story in Destiny Child is actually pretty ridiculously, like, you could make an anime out of it. So, like, if they continue to make games like that I can appreciate outside of their mechanical features, maybe it's not a horrible industry after all.
That'd be good.
On the same time, it's kind of depressing that the spiritual successor to Chrono Trigger is a fucking mobile game. But it did get confirmed for a port for Nintendo Switch.
Ooh, okay, that's cool.
And that's kind of crazy to, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's a portable console too, so it shouldn't seem that crazy. Emails, or singular email. If you want to write in comments, questions, or corrections, you can reach us at podcast@fancyramen.com. We have one from Burke. Just Burke. Didn't have anything else. This one's a lengthy one, though, so... Hello, Fancy Ramen Podcast. Regarding the debate in sound quality between the PlayStation and Saturn, period. The truth might be a little complicated. Fun fact, the full-size Sony PlayStation was actually one of the best-sounding CD players you could buy, offering better clarity and quality than audiophile-level CD players. All of you might not be old enough to know, but people actually began playing the original PlayStation with the sole intent of using them as glorified CD players. It is similar to PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3 in that they each became popular as early market affordable DVD and Blu-ray players in their respective functions. The PlayStation and Saturn could both play Redbook audio. The PlayStation could play compressed audio with additional envelope manipulation on playback. The Saturn was not able to play compressed audio, but had 12 more channels with FM synthesis available. So in theory, anything the PlayStation could have been recreated with the Saturn. But in practice, the PlayStation often thrived at its higher capacity for samples, in parentheses, compressed, and the Saturn's FM synthesis would ultimately result in more electronica-sounding instruments in comparison. Likewise, some developers cut costs on storage by overcompressing their audio, resulting in artifacts in poor quality. At the end of the day, I wouldn't say one is better than the other. There are several games on both that sound different, but not necessarily better or worse. A couple of soundtracks to illustrate the futility of this argument: Chrono Cross for the PlayStation and Panzer Dragoon Saga for the Saturn. We must have talked about this in the past.
No, we did. It was actually pretty recently. I'm super thankful. Yeah, I'm super thankful to Burke for bringing this up, because this is a more nuanced amount of information or discussion than we would normally ever access in the podcast, unless, of course, we've prepared for it. While I think I made a glib, joking comment about the quality of the Saturn to the... I can't remember if it was distinctly to the PlayStation. See, the problem is with podcasting is, although it's a performative media and it's something that is recorded, and then we have it repeated exposure through editing and even re-listening, I forget a lot of what I say. And so it's tough sometimes for me to remember exactly the stake or position I took, because my mental state is different today than it was a week ago, when I probably shit talked something with the Saturn being the superior audio system. I do at least remember I can take Cookie down with me, because we were in agreement that we liked the sound chip better. Either way, this information was super helpful, and it was a pleasure to read and learn about. And two, I am too young to actually have any memory of that whatsoever. Using the PlayStation for a CD player, I guess, makes sense to me, because I was at least of the era where the PS3 was the optimal choice for Blu-ray player, because you got a console out of it, or vice versa. You got a console with a Blu-ray player.
I do remember them actually being cheaper than most Blu-ray players.
Exactly. And so why wouldn't you get something that has that better, that has an additional functionality for a cheaper price?
Was the PlayStation actually in the same vein of there not being CD players in abundance before the PlayStation came out? That's something I obviously haven't fact checked it beforehand.
Beyond my age. It is definitely beyond my age, because I had, at the same time the PlayStation came out, I had I guess, portable boombox that was a CD player and a cassette player, but I don't know past that if there was anything.
It was this email that reminded me that Chrono Cross, that that soundtrack was probably just as good as Chrono Trigger. I had to dive back into the OST and be like, oh yeah, this is really good.
And this is when I have to admit once again that I played Chrono Trigger on my laptop on a ROM, and so I was listening to Kanye West's Late Registration the whole time I played that game.
The best soundtrack ever.
That's the soundtrack that I associate with Chrono Trigger and Earthbound. So,
oh, that's really weird with Earthbound.
It works for both.
Well, I think unless you have any further comments regarding this email.
This blizzard has gotten progressively worse. Oh, no, that's just a comment outside of the email. Thank you so much for the email, Burke. Really well written, and I'm glad we could have it on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all I got. I'm about to be buried in snow, it looks like, so I need to shuffle off to a Super Bowl party where I'll eat all the food and not even know who wins the game probably by the end of it.
Part of me wants to root for the Patriots because I know everyone hates the Patriots.
No, not everybody hates the Patriots. It's just Patriots fans are, I think, rightfully reluctant to voice their support for one of the most hated teams in sports. Because if you're the best team, you're hated.
But I think that kind of illustrates my point, though. It's like, if you're not a Patriots fan, it seems like you hate the Patriots if you care about football.
Or maybe people hate Bill Belichick and Tom Brady especially, and they are so tied to the Patriots brand that they're inextricable. And it's much easier to hate individual people for their failings than an entire team. So when your team is represented by two hateable people, I think it's easier.
I'll put it this way: when I see a player on TV with a lower third, like the subtitle, if you will, or the text below the person to illustrate or label what it is that they're doing, it said Tom Brady, and below that, known cheat.
He just misinterpreted the rules.
And at that point, yeah, I could probably say with confidence, if you like football and you don't like and you're not a Patriots fan, you probably hate the Patriots. So it's kind of fun sometimes to root for the Empire, especially when you're a known cheat.
I'm not taking a stance on this. I'm here for the food.
But yeah, that does it for this episode of Fancy Ramen Podcast, episode 105, I believe. I didn't have a name for this episode yet. Maybe I'll find one as we go through.
Yet. Yeah, we'll get one.
Comments, questions, corrections, podcast@fancyramen.com. We really appreciate anything you guys send us, including memes and whatever else. Make us feel stupid too. That's fine.
Go ahead and leave us a like or a review on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure to tell a friend about our podcast. We can't get more emails, more reviews and whatnot if we don't have a larger listener base. And so you can do us a huge favor by just spreading the word.
I don't care if we don't get likes or reviews or anything like that. I just like doing this podcast and I like talking to people about games. So tell a friend if you're enjoying your time here.
We'll be here no matter what, but the more people interested in us, the better we can do. It's peer pressure. It's a pressure element. It's the same reason I used to go to the library in college to study, because I can't study unless I feel like I'm being actively judged in my environment for not studying.
Damn, wow. I wish I knew that trick when I was a kid.
This is why I'm so smart. I use the crushing fear of failure to motivate myself.
And this is why I'm also an alcoholic. No.
Well, we will see you guys next week.
Have a great week, everyone.
Have a good one, everybody.